John Dillinger was an American gangster in the United States. He operated with a group of men known as the Dillinger Gang, who were accused of robbing 24 banks and 4 police stations, killing 10 men in the process. He was finally arrested in Tucson, Arizona in January 1934 and sent to Lake Country Jail in Crown Point, Indiana on charges for killing a police officer during a bank robbery in 1933. The jail was considered escape-proof, but Dillinger was about to change that. On March 3rd, 1934, Dillinger, along with another inmate, allegedly used a fake gun carved out of wood and blackened with shoe polish to force their way out of the prison, and just for good measure, he used the sheriff's brand new Fiat Ford as an escape vehicle. Later in the year, Dillinger was shot dead in Chicago by FBI agents. His escape is brought to life in Michael Mann's 2009 movie about Dillinger, Public Enemy, which was actually filmed inside the jailhouse the real John Dillinger broke out of 75 years earlier. Antonio Ferrara was a part of a group of veteran bank robbers known as the Dream Team, which were labelled the most dangerous gang in Europe by Interpol. Ferrara was well known in the French underworld, also for his remarkable ability to create the perfect explosion to open a safe and leave the cash unharmed. At the age of 29, he was sentenced to serve an 8-year prison term for 2 armed robberies and was suspected of at least 15 more. Just 5 years into his jail career, he decided enough was enough and escaped the only way an explosive expert knows how. At 4:30 a.m. on March 12, 2003, 6 men drove up to the front gates of Fresnes prison in fake police cars clothed in police uniforms and ski masks. Some fired AKs at the 2 adjacent guard towers, while the other group blew open the front doors with rocket-propelled grenade launchers. Ferrara then blew his own door with a small stick of dynamite, believed to have been snuck in by a guard, and joined up with his gang, which all fled. This took just under 10 minutes to accomplish. After being on the run for 4 months and being declared France's most wanted man, Ferrara was recaptured in a Paris bar during an undercover operation, and was quoted with saying only one thing as he was arrested: "You again?" Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary is a maximum security prison that is located on a tiny island off the coast of San Francisco. This prison was supposed to be the prison that no man could ever escape, but in June 1962, 3 men tested its prodigious reputation. Clarence Anglin, John Anglin and Frank Morris were serving time for several crimes, including bank robbery and car thefts, when they resolved to escape Alcatraz and its claustrophobic confines. The trio cut holes into their walls, leaving behind dummy bodies in their beds to fool the guards into thinking that they were still in their cells. After exiting the building for a ventilation vent, the men scaled a prison fence and fashioned a raft from raincoats and contact cement. They cast off into the cold waters of San Francisco Bay at around 10 p.m. Morris and the 2 Anglin brothers were never found, and the FBI investigation concluded that the 3 men probably died at sea due to heavy currents. French murderer Pascal Payet has gained international notoriety for his role in a series of daring prison escapes that used helicopters as escape vehicles. Payet's first escape came in 2001 when he arranged for friends to collect him from the roof of the prison in a helicopter. And 2 years later, he orchestrated a rerun of the events to help 3 more prisoners escape. Payet was later caught and was sentenced to 30 years in prison for murder in 2005. Yet despite being one of France's most closely watched prisoners, he once again managed to break free of the law. He did this in 2007 by taking advantage of Bastille Day celebrations to jump into a hijacked helicopter flown by 4 masked men. He was later found near Barcelona and transferred to a secret location where he now remains to this day. Ronald Arthur Biggs was featured on another one of our lists, and here he is again. Biggs was jailed for his part in the Great Train Robbery and served only 15 months of his sentence before escaping from Wandsworth Prison on the 8th of July 1965. He used a rope ladder to scale over the wall and then dropped onto a waiting removal van. Once collected, he fled to Brussels by boat and sent a note to his wife to join him in Paris, where he acquired new identity papers and was undergoing plastic surgery. During his time in prison, his wife Charmaine had started an extramarital relationship and was pregnant by the time of his escape. Choosing to support her husband, she had an illegal abortion in London and then travelled with her 2 sons to Paris to join Biggs. Biggs would remain on the run for many years until he was finally located in Brazil. The UK government asked the Brazilian government for extradition, which they refused. Having 28 years of his sentence left to serve, Biggs was aware that he would be detained upon arrival back in Britain. His trip back to Britain was on a private jet paid for by the Sun newspaper, which reportedly paid Michael Biggs £20,000 plus other expenses in return for exclusive rights to the news story. Biggs arrived on the 7th of May 2001, where he was immediately arrested and re-imprisoned. Over the next few years, Biggs tried to get released from prison due to failing health, but each of his requests was denied. He was finally released from custody on the 6th of August, 2 days before his 80th birthday on compassionate grounds. And on the 18th of December 2013, Biggs died at Carlton Court Care Home in Barnet, North London, aged 84. This here is an absolute crazy one, as a dozen inmates escaped from an Alabama jail by using peanut butter to change the numbers above a door and trick a new employee into opening another door that led outside. The inmates changed the number of a cell with a number of a door that led outside of the jail, so when an inmate asked a young inexperienced guard to let him into his cell, the jailer was fooled into opening the outside door instead. The group then fled, throwing off their orange jumpsuits and using blankets to climb over a fence topped with razor wire. The 11 men were arrested without violence, and the only person hurt was an inmate who sliced his thumb whilst climbing over. They had apparently saved peanut butter from food regularly served at the jail, with their sheriff saying, "They love peanut butter sandwiches." Notorious conman Frank Abagnale escaped from a federal detention centre in Atlanta, Georgia in 1971 by convincing prison guards he was a prison inspector and not a prisoner when a US Marshal forgot his detention papers upon arriving at the facility. Abagnale worked with an accomplice on the outside to convince the guards that he was actually an undercover police prison inspector posing as an inmate who was there to spy on the staff. Over several weeks, he built his fake alibi until the guards trusted him enough to meet his accomplice outside the prison walls in a car. Once Abagnale walked out of the prison, the guards never saw him again. He evaded the authorities for 4 months before being arrested in Washington, D.C., and he would serve 4 years in Virginia before being paroled. Today, he works for the FBI as an advisor for white-collared crimes. Yoga practitioner Choi Gap Bok added a new page to the criminal's history book with a new take on prison escape methods. Rather than bending his cell bars out of shape in order to fit through them, he bent and contorted himself out of shape so that he could slip out through a tiny slot at the bottom of the cell that is used to give prisoners their food. And what's even more impressive is that this manoeuvre only took him 34 seconds to accomplish his escape. Gap Bok was rearrested 6 days later, and he was placed into a cell with a much smaller food slot to stop a repeat of the escape again. Alfred Hinds was a British criminal and escape artist who, while serving a 12-year sentence for robbery, successfully broke out of 3 high-security prisons. First, Hinds escaped from Nottingham Prison by sneaking through the locked doors and over a 20-foot wall. After 6 months, he was found and arrested. And after his arrest, he filed a lawsuit against the authorities, charging the prison commissioners with illegal arrest, and he used this incident as a means of a second escape. Hinds had a padlock smuggled into the courts while he was there. Asking to use the toilet, 2 guards escorted him, and when they removed his handcuffs, Alfred bundled them into the cubicle and shut the lock onto screw eyes his accomplice had earlier fixed onto the door. He escaped into the crowd on Fleet Street, but was captured at an airport 5 hours after. He would make his third escape from Chelmsford Prison less than a year later. In 1960, he was sent to serve 6 years in Parkhurst Prison. The Libby prison escape was one of the most famous and successful prison breaks during the American Civil War. Overnight, between February the 9th and February the 10th, 1864, more than 100 imprisoned Union soldiers broke out of their prisoner of war building at Libby Prison in Richmond, Virginia. Of the 109 escapees, 59 succeeded in reaching Union lines, 48 were recaptured, and 2 drowned in the nearby James River. The prisoners broke into a basement area that was unused due to rat infestations, and after 17 days of digging, they succeeded in breaking through to the 50-foot-long vacant lot on the side of the prison. They resurfaced beneath a tobacco shed inside the grounds of nearby Care's warehouse. When Colonel Rose broke through to the other side, he told his men that the Underground Railroad to God's country was open. The officers all escaped the prison in groups of 2s and 3s, and once collected within the tobacco shed, they rallied in the warehouse yard and simply strolled out of the front gate.